Have you ever felt your anger flare up at the smallest inconvenience? Like when someone cuts you off in traffic, or when a loved one says something that hurts. Do you ever wonder, why does this bother me so much? Do you find yourself wishing you could keep calm? No matter the situation, anger, as overwhelming as it feels, is something we all deal with. But what if there's a way to erase it for good, to live with peace even when life tests your patience? Imagine this. You're holding a glass of water. Someone bumps your hand, and the water spills everywhere. You might think, why did they have to bump me? But the truth is, the glass spilled because it was full. The same goes for anger. It overflows when it's already filled within us. The question isn't who bumped me, it's why was my glass so full to begin with? Welcome to Wisdom Woven, where we explore profound yet practical wisdom to transform your life. If you've ever felt trapped by your emotions or struggled to let go of anger, you're in the right place. Today, we'll uncover the roots of anger and share timeless Buddhist insights to help you erase it for good. There are so many views on this channel, but only 0.2% of viewers subscribe. If you find value here, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to support us and join this journey toward a calmer, happier life. Anger isn't just a random emotion. It's a response tied to deep roots within us. Buddhism teaches that anger often stems from unmet expectations, desires, or a feeling of being wronged. When we expect the world to act a certain way, and it doesn't, frustration builds. Over time, this becomes anger, a fire that burns within and spreads harm outward. But is anger really as powerful as it seems? The Buddha described anger as a thief. It steals your peace, your happiness, and even your health. The mind clouded by anger can't see clearly, can't think wisely, and can't act compassionately. Yet, we hold on to it, convinced it protects us or gives us strength. In Buddhism, understanding is the first step toward change. When we look deeply into our anger, we begin to see it's not as solid as it seems. It's not you. It's simply a reaction, born of old habits and unexamined thoughts. The path to freedom begins when we start asking, why am I angry? What am I holding on to? By recognizing that anger comes from within, not from others or external situations, we can take the first step toward letting it go. Anger thrives when we blame, when we resist, and when we cling to our expectations. But when we pause, observe, and understand, it begins to lose its grip. Stay with us as we continue this journey in upcoming parts, where we'll delve deeper into the Buddhist practices and wisdom that can help you erase anger for good and embrace a life of inner peace. The cycle of suffering, how anger traps us. Anger, like a chain, binds us to the cycle of suffering. In Buddhism, we speak of samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, where all beings are trapped by desires, attachments, and aversions. Anger is one of these strong attachments. It holds us tightly in a loop of negativity, feeding on itself, creating more pain, and preventing us from experiencing peace. When we get angry, we are caught in a web of reactions. The moment we feel the heat rise within us, our mind begins to spiral. Thoughts become charged, emotions become sharp, and before we know it, we are lost in a storm. In that moment, it's as if the world is divided into us and them, right and wrong, good and bad. We see things in black and white, and our anger becomes the lens through which we view the world. Everything is distorted. In Buddhism, this is called ignorance. We are ignorant of the true nature of things. When we allow ourselves to be caught in anger, we are not seeing things as they are. We are seeing them through the fog of our own projections and expectations. We believe that someone has wronged us, that life is unfair, or that things should be different. But the truth is, reality is far more complex than this. The Buddha taught that suffering arises when we try to control what is beyond our control, when we resist the flow of life, and when we cling to our own ideas and judgments. The cycle begins when we are triggered by something external, a comment, an action, an event. These all have the potential to stir up anger within us. But it's not the external thing that causes our anger. It is our reaction to it. Our anger arises because we have expectations and attachments. We expect people to behave in a certain way. We expect things to go as planned. When they don't, frustration builds up inside us, and it spills over into anger. The cycle deepens when we feed our anger. We hold on to it, nurture it, and let it grow. We replay the situation in our minds over and over again, building up the story, reinforcing our belief that we were wronged. With each replay, the anger grows stronger, and the cycle becomes harder to break. We become trapped, unable to see beyond our emotions. The more we hold on to anger, the more we suffer. It's like holding a hot coal in our hand, expecting the other person to feel the burn. But in reality, it is we who are burned. The Buddha spoke of the Four Noble Truths, which explain the nature of suffering and the path to liberation. The second truth is that suffering is caused by attachment, by clinging to things that are impermanent. When we attach ourselves to outcomes, to people, to expectations, we set ourselves up for suffering. Anger is a manifestation of this attachment. We cling to our belief that things should be different, that the world should treat us fairly, and when it doesn't, we become angry. But here is the liberating truth. Anger is not permanent. Just as clouds drift across the sky, anger too can pass. However, we need to understand the cycle in order to break free from it. When we are caught in anger, we believe that it is a part of us. We identify with it. I am angry, we say, but anger is not who we are. It is just a passing emotion, a reaction. We are not our emotions. We are not our thoughts. We are not our anger. This understanding is the first step toward freedom. To break the cycle of anger, we must first recognize it for what it is, a temporary state, a reaction, not a reflection of our true nature. The moment we can step back and observe our anger without becoming it, we begin to create space. This space allows us to make a choice. Instead of reacting in anger, we can respond with wisdom and compassion. But to do this, we must first understand that anger doesn't serve us. It doesn't bring peace. It only creates more suffering, both for ourselves and for others. In the Zen tradition, we practice mindfulness to see clearly. When we are mindful, we are fully present in the moment. We observe our thoughts, feelings, and sensations without judgment or attachment. Mindfulness helps us to break the cycle of anger because it allows us to catch the first spark before it turns into a fire. When we feel the heat of anger rising, we can simply notice it, acknowledge it, and let it go. Instead of reacting, we choose to respond with a calm mind. This practice is not easy. It requires patience and consistency. But just like training the body to become stronger, training the mind requires effort. Each time we catch ourselves in the cycle of anger, we have an opportunity to practice. Each time we choose not to react, we are breaking the chain, slowly but surely. Over time, we can learn to respond with peace, no matter the situation. The Buddha also taught about the importance of cultivating loving kindness, metta, and compassion, karuna, to counteract anger. When we practice metta, we wish well for all beings, including those who anger us. Instead of seeing others as enemies, we begin to see them as fellow travelers on the path of life, each struggling with their own challenges. When we cultivate compassion, we begin to understand that others' actions are not about us. They are a reflection of their own struggles and limitations. This understanding helps us to release anger and replace it with empathy and love. To cultivate loving kindness, we can start with ourselves. We are often our own harshest critics, holding on to anger and resentment toward ourselves for past mistakes. But just as we would show kindness to a friend, we must show kindness to ourselves. By forgiving ourselves, we begin to loosen the grip of anger. We can then extend this kindness to others, even those who may have hurt us. This is not about excusing their behavior, but about freeing ourselves from the poison of anger. The key to breaking the cycle of anger is understanding that it is not who we are. We are not our emotions. We are not our reactions. We are the awareness behind them, the silent observer. When we see this, we no longer identify with anger. It no longer controls us. We can choose peace, choose kindness, choose compassion. As we continue on this path, we must remember that change takes time. The cycle of anger may not be broken in a single moment, but each step we take brings us closer to freedom. We may stumble, we may fall, but with each fall, we learn. With each moment of mindfulness, we grow. Slowly, the storm of anger will pass, and in its place, we will find calm, clarity, and peace. In the next part, we will explore how mindfulness can help us recognize anger before it takes hold, allowing us to create space between our emotions and our reactions. Mindfulness, the path to recognizing anger. Imagine you're sitting under a tree on a peaceful afternoon. The leaves gently sway in the breeze, and everything feels calm. In this stillness, you begin to feel a slight tension building inside, like a storm quietly forming. Maybe someone said something you didn't like, or you're feeling frustrated by an unfinished task. The storm of anger begins, and you can't quite put your finger on why it's happening. This is where mindfulness enters the picture. Mindfulness is simply the art of paying attention. It's the ability to notice, without judgment, what's happening in your mind and body in each moment. Most of the time, anger comes to us uninvited. It's like a cloud forming in the sky. Suddenly, we're angry, and we don't even know exactly why. But mindfulness allows us to recognize anger as it arises, before it has a chance to take over. In Buddhism, mindfulness is considered a powerful tool for understanding and transforming our inner world. When we practice mindfulness, we create space between stimulus and reaction. We start to notice the subtle shift in our feelings, the tightening in our chest, or the rising heat in our body. Anger, in its most basic form, is a reaction, a response to something we find unpleasant. But the key is to see it early, to recognize it before it becomes a wildfire. Think about this. How many times in your life have you felt angry, only to realize later that the cause of your anger wasn't even as big as it seemed? Perhaps you snapped at someone or held onto a grudge for far too long, only to discover that the situation wasn't worth the emotional toll it took. This is the power of mindfulness. It helps us see the truth before we act, before we allow anger to drive us to do or say things we'll later regret. When you bring mindfulness into your life, you stop reacting automatically. Instead, you start to observe what's happening. Let's say you're in a conversation and someone says something that irritates you. Normally, you might feel that rush of anger, that urge to respond quickly and defensively. But with mindfulness, you pause. You take a breath. You feel your body. You notice the rising anger, and instead of acting on it, you give yourself a moment to simply observe. This pause creates a space in which anger loses its power. Instead of blindly reacting, you become the observer of your feelings. This practice of observing rather than reacting is the foundation of mindfulness. You are no longer a slave to your emotions. You are not the anger. You are the one who notices it, understands it, and decides what to do with it. Mindfulness doesn't ask you to suppress your anger or deny it. Instead, it invites you to simply be aware of it. When you acknowledge that anger is present, you begin to unravel its hold over you. The next time you feel anger rising, ask yourself, where is this feeling coming from? Why am I feeling this way? These questions are part of mindfulness. They help you understand the root of your emotions. The Buddha taught that awareness of our feelings is the key to freedom. When we are mindful, we see clearly. We can differentiate between what is real and what is merely a passing thought or emotion. Anger often feels like a storm that's impossible to control, but through mindfulness, you can see that it's just a temporary condition, like the clouds in the sky. The storm comes, but it will pass, just like everything else. Let's take a moment to practice this. Next time you're angry, stop for a second. Close your eyes if you can, and breathe deeply. Focus on your breath as it moves in and out. Now, bring your awareness to the anger you're feeling. What does it feel like? Does your chest tighten? Do your muscles feel tense? Is there a heat building inside you? Observe it without judgment. Simply notice what is happening. You might notice that the anger isn't as intense as it seemed at first. When we bring mindfulness to our emotions, we realize they are not as solid or lasting as we once believed. Anger is like a wave. It rises, peaks, and then fades away. When we practice mindfulness, we can let it pass without being swept away by it. Mindfulness also teaches us to be kind to ourselves. Often, when we feel anger, we also feel guilty about it. We think, I shouldn't feel this way. I should be calm. This judgment only deepens our suffering. But mindfulness allows us to approach ourselves with compassion. We don't have to be perfect. We just need to be aware. And through awareness, we can slowly shift our reactions. The Buddha spoke about right effort, the effort to cultivate positive mental states, and let go of harmful ones. When it comes to anger, mindfulness is the right effort. It's the effort to notice the anger, to breathe through it, and to choose a response that is aligned with peace rather than reactivity. Anger, in its essence, is the result of clinging to something we think we want or need. Whether it's an idea of how others should behave or expectations about life, anger arises when these desires go unmet. But when we practice mindfulness, we begin to loosen our grip on these expectations. We learn to accept life as it is, not as we want it to be. In the next few parts, we'll explore how to transform anger through compassion, patience, and forgiveness. But for now, remember this: mindfulness is not a quick fix. It's a practice, a journey. Each time you notice your anger, you are practicing mindfulness. Each time you pause before reacting, you are training your mind to be more peaceful. The more you practice, the easier it becomes to let go of anger and cultivate a peaceful heart. As you move forward, start to incorporate mindfulness into your daily life. It doesn't have to be complicated. You can practice mindfulness while washing the dishes, walking, or even sitting in traffic. It's about bringing your full attention to the present moment, without judgment. The more you do this, the more natural it becomes to notice when anger arises, and the more empowered you will be to let it go. The path of mindfulness is one of gradual change. Over time, the small moments of awareness build into a deep sense of peace. And with that peace, the storms of anger will no longer have the power to control you. The next time you feel anger rising, remember, you don't have to react. You can simply notice it, breathe, and allow it to pass. This is the path to true freedom. The Buddha once said, "You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger." This is the essence of mindfulness. By choosing to notice and understand your anger, you stop it from controlling you. Instead of being a prisoner of your emotions, you become the master of them. The more you practice mindfulness, the more you will find peace in your everyday life, no matter what happens around you. So, sit with your anger. Observe it. See how it arises, how it changes, and how it eventually fades. And in that space of awareness, you will find the freedom to let go. The power of compassion, transforming anger into understanding. Anger, it burns hot, like fire. It clouds our vision, distorts our thoughts, and pushes us to act in ways that we later regret. Yet, behind every act of anger, there is something deeper, a wound, a fear, a longing. To truly erase our anger, we must not fight it, but understand it. And the key to this understanding is compassion. Compassion is the most powerful tool we have to transform anger. When we feel anger rising, it's as though we are holding a hot coal in our hand. We cannot release the coal because we are afraid of the burn. But what if instead of holding on to it, we allowed ourselves to open our hand and let it go? Compassion, both for ourselves and others, is the gentle force that can help us do this. In Buddhism, compassion is not just a feeling, it is a practice. It begins with the understanding that all beings, including ourselves, suffer. We all face challenges, hardships, and pain. When we recognize this, when we truly feel the shared nature of suffering, our anger begins to lose its grip. We realize that the person who has wronged us, the situation that has triggered us, is not the source of our anger. It is our reaction to it that creates the fire. Take a moment to reflect on your own experiences of anger. How often have you felt angry because someone misunderstood you, hurt your feelings, or violated your expectations? In those moments, what if you had paused and thought, why is this person acting this way? What might they be going through? Anger often arises from ignorance, both our own and the other person's. When we choose to see things from their perspective, compassion naturally follows. Imagine you are walking in the shoes of someone who has upset you. They might be carrying burdens you cannot see, struggling with their own fears and doubts. Perhaps they acted out of their own pain or frustration. The more we understand this, the less room there is for anger to grow. Instead of seeing them as an enemy, we begin to see them as fellow travelers on the path of life, just like us. Compassion also turns inward. How often do we harbor anger toward ourselves? We make mistakes, we fall short of our expectations, and we beat ourselves up for it. But anger toward ourselves only deepens the wound. Instead of harsh judgment, we need to offer ourselves the same compassion we would offer a friend. We need to forgive ourselves, to acknowledge that we, too, are doing our best in a world full of challenges. The Buddha taught us that true compassion arises from the heart, not from the mind. It is not an intellectual exercise. It is not something we can fake or force. True compassion comes from the realization that we are all connected, that the suffering of others is also our suffering, and that the healing of one contributes to the healing of all. When we practice compassion, we are not condoning harmful behavior. Compassion does not mean we let others walk all over us or tolerate injustice. Instead, compassion allows us to respond with wisdom. It allows us to separate our feelings from our actions. Instead of reacting in anger, we respond with kindness, with clarity, and with strength. We choose to act not out of reactivity, but out of understanding. In the heat of anger, it can be difficult to see clearly, but when we invite compassion into our hearts, the fog begins to lift. We begin to see the situation for what it truly is, not what we imagined it to be in our anger. Compassion helps us to pause, to breathe, and to choose a response that comes from a place of peace, not from a place of emotional turmoil. It's important to remember that compassion is a practice. It takes time. Just like any other skill, it requires patience, dedication, and effort. But every time we choose compassion over anger, we move one step closer to freedom. The more we practice, the more natural it becomes, until one day we find ourselves responding with compassion before anger even has a chance to rise. A key aspect of Buddhist teachings on compassion is the concept of loving kindness, or metta. Loving kindness is the wish for all beings to be happy, free from suffering, and at peace. When we cultivate loving kindness toward ourselves and others, we begin to soften our hearts. We begin to see beyond the surface, beyond the actions that hurt us, to the deeper, shared human experience. When we see the world through the lens of loving kindness, our anger naturally diminishes. In a world where anger and division often seem to dominate, compassion can be revolutionary. It can transform our relationships, our communities, and our world. Compassion is not a passive response. It is an active force for change. When we meet anger with compassion, we not only heal ourselves, but we also offer healing to others. We become a source of peace in the midst of chaos. You might be wondering, how can I practice compassion when I am so angry? The first step is to slow down. Take a deep breath. Give yourself space to feel your anger without acting on it. Then, ask yourself, what does this person need? What do I need? When we meet anger with a question, instead of a reaction, we open up the possibility of compassion. Sometimes, compassion comes in the form of silence. In moments of anger, we may not need to say anything at all. We may just need to be present, to listen, to understand. When we listen deeply to others, when we listen with the intention of seeing their suffering and their humanity, we begin to break down the walls of anger that separate us. Compassion also involves boundaries. It's important to remember that compassion does not mean we tolerate harmful behavior. We can be compassionate and still set limits. We can say, I understand you are suffering, but I cannot allow this behavior to continue. Compassion is about responding wisely, not passively. The more we practice compassion, the more we see that the root of our anger is often not the person in front of us, but our own unmet needs and expectations. By practicing compassion, we begin to release our attachment to these expectations. We begin to accept that people are not here to meet our every need. They are on their own journey, just as we are on ours. When we release our expectations, we release our anger. Over time, you will notice that compassion becomes your default response. Instead of reacting in anger, you will begin to respond with understanding and patience. You will find yourself forgiving more easily, letting go of grudges, and finding peace even in difficult situations. This is the power of compassion. It has the ability to transform not just the way we relate to others, but the way we relate to ourselves. Ultimately, compassion leads to freedom. Freedom from anger. Freedom from suffering. Freedom to live in harmony with others and with ourselves. When we choose compassion, we choose peace. And peace, as the Buddha taught, is the ultimate antidote to anger. Non-attachment, letting go of resentment. In the quiet of the morning, when the world is still, there is a moment of peace. The sun slowly rises, casting light on everything it touches, without attachment or judgment. It simply shines. It doesn't ask for anything in return. The trees do not hold onto the leaves they lose. The rivers do not cling to the water that flows away. In their wisdom, they understand the natural flow of life. This is non-attachment, a state of being where you no longer cling to the past or resist the future. And this is the path to letting go of resentment. Resentment is like carrying a heavy rock in your hands. At first, it seems manageable. You think, I can hold on to this for a while. But as time passes, the rock grows heavier and more exhausting to carry. Eventually, it becomes a burden. The longer you hold on, the harder it is to let go. But here's the truth. The rock is not your burden. It is your choice to carry it. In Buddhism, non-attachment doesn't mean not caring. It doesn't mean you stop loving or stop being engaged in life. It means you stop holding tightly to things that don't serve you. You stop clinging to old wounds, past hurts, and feelings of betrayal. These are like old thorns buried in your heart, causing pain every time you move. If you want to walk freely, you must let go of the thorns. Non-attachment teaches us to release these thorns, to let go of resentment. When you hold on to anger, bitterness, or past grudges, you are only harming yourself. The person who wronged you has long since moved on, but you remain stuck, holding that weight. Resentment keeps you tied to them in a way that steals your peace. By letting go, you are setting yourself free. The Buddha once said, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. This is the essence of attachment. When we attach ourselves to resentment, we think it is a way to protect ourselves or get justice. But in truth, it is only hurting us. The only way to end the cycle of suffering is to release these attachments. So, how do we practice non-attachment? The first step is awareness. When you feel resentment rising, take a deep breath and pause. Ask yourself, what am I holding on to right now? Why does this situation make me feel upset? You might find that the source of your resentment is based on an expectation that was never fulfilled, or a story you tell yourself about what should have happened. The moment you begin to question these thoughts, you are stepping onto the path of non-attachment. Non-attachment is also about recognizing that nothing in life is permanent. People change, situations change, and even our feelings change. The pain you feel today will not last forever unless you choose to hold on to it. Just as the seasons change, so too will your feelings. This understanding allows you to let go more easily because you know that nothing stays the same forever. By letting go, you allow space for new growth, new opportunities, and new experiences to come into your life. Letting go of resentment requires forgiveness. But forgiveness is not about the other person. It is about freeing yourself. You don't forgive because someone deserves it. You forgive because you deserve peace. Holding on to resentment is like locking yourself in a cage, thinking that the person who wronged you is the one who is trapped. But in reality, it is you who is trapped, holding the key to your own freedom. Forgiveness is also an act of compassion, both toward others and toward yourself. Compassion doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior. It means recognizing that everyone is imperfect. It means understanding that the person who hurt you might be struggling with their own pain, their own anger, their own attachments. Compassion allows you to see beyond the offense and recognize the shared humanity in both of you. When you practice non-attachment, you begin to see the world through the lens of impermanence. Life is a series of moments, all of which are constantly changing. Holding on to resentment is like trying to hold on to a moment that has already passed. The more you try to hold on, the more you suffer. Letting go allows you to move with the flow of life, embracing each moment as it comes, without trying to control it. It's important to remember that non-attachment is not indifference. It is not the same as detaching from life or from love. In fact, the more you let go of attachment to things and outcomes, the more you can experience life fully, without fear or hesitation. Non-attachment frees you to experience love, joy, and peace without the burden of expectations. The Buddha often spoke of the middle path, the path between extremes. Non-attachment is not about renouncing everything in life. It's about finding balance. It's about engaging in life fully, without the need to cling to it. It's about loving without the fear of loss, giving without expecting anything in return, and living without the weight of resentment or regret. In moments of anger or hurt, remind yourself, this too shall pass. The person who wronged you, the situation that upset you, it is already in the past. Holding on to it only keeps you trapped there. If you want to move forward, you must let go. Practice non-attachment by releasing the grip of resentment. When you do, you will find yourself walking lighter, with a heart free to love, to heal, and to experience peace. And remember, letting go doesn't mean you forget or condone what happened. It simply means that you are choosing to no longer let that event control your peace. The past is gone, and all we have is the present moment. Non-attachment is the key to living in this moment, with an open heart and a clear mind, ready to embrace whatever comes next. So, take a deep breath and let go. Release the weight you carry. Allow the present to unfold without the burden of past resentments. When you do, you will find that your heart feels lighter, your mind clearer, and your life more peaceful. Non-attachment is not about giving up on life. It's about embracing it fully, without the need to hold on to anything that doesn't serve you. Meditation practices to dissolve anger. In the stillness of the mind, there is peace. But too often, the mind is like a storm, thoughts swirling, emotions rising, and anger growing stronger with every passing moment. In this storm, it's easy to lose sight of what's real, what's true, and what brings peace. But in the practice of meditation, there is a way to calm that storm, to find clarity amidst the chaos. Meditation is not a tool for escaping life, but a way to see life clearly as it truly is. When we meditate, we create space between our thoughts and our reactions. This space allows us to observe our anger instead of being consumed by it. We don't need to force the anger away. We don't need to fight it. All we need to do is notice it, see it for what it is, and let it go. When anger arises, instead of allowing it to control us, we can pause and sit with it. This is where meditation begins, simply noticing the anger. In Buddhism, we call this practice mindfulness. To be mindful is to be fully present, to observe without judgment, and to accept whatever arises without clinging or rejecting it. So when anger arises, instead of running from it or acting on it, we simply sit with it, as we would sit with a guest in our home. The first step in using meditation to dissolve anger is to find a quiet place to sit. It doesn't need to be a perfect place, just somewhere you can be comfortable and undisturbed. Sit with your back straight, your hands resting in your lap, and your eyes gently closed. Begin by taking a few deep breaths, feeling the air fill your lungs, and then slowly leave your body. As you breathe in peace. As you breathe out, let go of tension. Now, bring your awareness to your thoughts. Don't try to stop them or control them, just observe them. Imagine that your thoughts are like clouds passing through the sky. Some are light and fluffy, while others may be dark and stormy. When anger arises, see it as just another cloud in the sky. It may be dark and heavy, but it's still just a cloud, temporary, fleeting, and not you. As you sit with the anger, notice how it feels in your body. Does your chest tighten? Do your fists clench? Does your breath become shallow or fast? Just observe these sensations without judgment. You don't need to change anything. You don't need to react. Simply notice the anger, the sensations, and the thoughts that come with it. Let them pass through you, like clouds moving across the sky. As you observe, you may begin to notice that the anger loses its power. It may still be there, but it no longer controls you. You may even find that it begins to soften, to dissolve, or to fade away altogether. This is the power of mindfulness, the ability to see things as they truly are, without getting lost in them. If the anger persists, that's okay. Meditation isn't about forcing anything to happen. It's about creating space for whatever arises, and then letting it go. You can gently return your attention to your breath whenever your mind starts to wander, whenever the anger begins to take over again. And if the anger comes back, simply notice it again and let it pass. In time, with regular practice, you'll notice something profound. The anger doesn't have the same grip on you anymore. It may still appear, but it no longer controls your actions, your words, or your thoughts. You can simply observe it, let it rise, and let it fall. Meditation is not a quick fix, but a long-term practice that brings lasting change. Just like planting a seed and watering it every day, your practice of mindfulness grows slowly over time. At first, it may feel difficult, like the storm in your mind is too strong to calm. But with patience, persistence, and compassion for yourself, you'll find that the storm will calm and peace will take its place. One of the most powerful forms of meditation for dissolving anger is called loving-kindness meditation. In this practice, you focus not on the anger, but on cultivating positive feelings of love, compassion, and goodwill. This practice is especially helpful when we are angry at others, because it shifts our focus from the negative emotion to a positive intention. To practice loving-kindness meditation, sit as you would for regular meditation. Take a few deep breaths to settle yourself. Then, begin by silently repeating these words to yourself. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I live with ease. Feel the warmth of these words as you say them. Let them fill your heart with love and compassion for yourself. Once you have repeated these phrases several times, extend them to others. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. First, send these wishes to someone you love, perhaps a family member or friend. Then, gradually, extend them to someone you feel neutral about, and finally, even to someone you may have trouble with. This may feel difficult at first, especially if anger is present, but remember, you're not wishing for them to be free of their faults. You are simply wishing them peace, wishing them happiness, and wishing them ease. In time, this meditation helps to soften the heart. It reduces the hardness of anger and replaces it with compassion. By focusing on others' well-being, we begin to see them not as enemies, but as fellow human beings struggling with their own challenges. We begin to let go of the need for retaliation, for being right, and for holding on to anger. Another effective meditation practice for dissolving anger is the practice of breathing into the anger. This practice involves focusing on the sensation of anger as it arises and breathing deeply into it. As you breathe in, imagine that you are drawing the anger into your body. As you breathe out, imagine that you are releasing it, letting it dissolve and melt away. At first, this practice may feel uncomfortable. Anger can be intense, and it can seem overwhelming. But if you remain with it, breathing into it instead of running from it, you'll find that the anger loses its sharpness. It becomes less intense, more manageable. Eventually, you may even feel a sense of peace surrounding the anger, as if it were no longer a threat. Through these meditation practices, we begin to understand that anger is not something we need to fear. It is not something that defines us. It is simply an emotion, a passing storm that can be weathered with patience, mindfulness, and compassion. And as we practice, we find that our relationship with anger changes. It no longer controls us, and it no longer defines us. The more we practice these methods, the more we strengthen the muscles of mindfulness and compassion. Over time, they become natural responses, and anger becomes less and less frequent. When it does arise, we are able to handle it with calmness and clarity. And in this way, meditation becomes the key to dissolving anger, not by fighting it, but by understanding it, observing it, and letting it go. Through meditation, we return to the peace that is always within us, waiting to be discovered. It is a peace that is never disturbed by the ups and downs of life, a peace that is not dependent on circumstances or the actions of others. And when we make this peace our home, anger no longer has a place to take root. It becomes like a visitor who arrives and quickly leaves, without causing any harm. In the end, meditation is the practice of returning to the present moment, of embracing the here and now without judgment or fear. It is the practice of seeing things as they truly are, without the distortion of anger, resentment, or attachment. And as we make this practice a part of our daily life, we can gradually erase anger for good and live in the peaceful presence of the moment. The role of patience, building inner peace. In a world that moves so quickly, where everything seems urgent and immediate, patience can feel like a foreign concept. We rush to complete tasks, hurry through conversations, and become frustrated when things don't go our way. Yet, patience is one of the most important virtues for anyone seeking peace, especially when dealing with anger. Imagine you are standing in a forest, and there is a tree before you. The tree stands tall, its branches stretching out slowly and steadily toward the sky. It doesn't hurry. It doesn't force itself to grow faster. It simply grows. This is patience, allowing things to unfold in their own time, without resistance. The tree does not compare itself to others. It just exists, rooted in the present moment. If we too can learn to be like the tree, patient, grounded, and present, we will find a deep peace that no anger can disturb. Patience is not something that happens automatically. It is a practice, something we need to cultivate day by day. When we are angry, we are often caught in the rush of our emotions. We want to act, to speak, to do something, anything to relieve the tension. But in doing so, we often make the situation worse. Patience teaches us to pause. Instead of reacting immediately, we take a breath, we step back, and we allow our thoughts to settle. Just like a storm passes when the wind calms, our anger begins to fade when we stop feeding it with our immediate responses. Buddha said, "You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger." Anger is like a fire. It can consume us if we allow it to. But patience is like water, soft and steady. It can calm the flames of anger, allowing us to see clearly and act with wisdom. Patience teaches us to give ourselves space before reacting. It teaches us to respond, not out of anger, but out of understanding. In Buddhism, patience is seen as a form of inner strength. The ability to remain calm in the face of adversity, to not rush into judgment or reaction, is a powerful tool for transforming anger. When we are patient, we are not weak. We are strong in a way that transcends immediate emotions. Patience does not mean passivity. It means having the courage to wait for clarity before taking action. It means trusting that, in time, the best solution will reveal itself. When we practice patience, we begin to understand that everything has its own timing. Just as we cannot rush a flower to bloom, we cannot rush our emotions to settle. It takes time to heal, time to understand, and time to grow. Patience teaches us to accept this natural flow. When we stop trying to force things, we free ourselves from the grip of frustration. But how do we develop patience, especially when everything around us seems to encourage haste and frustration? The key is awareness. When you feel anger rising, take a moment to notice it. Instead of immediately reacting, simply observe it. I feel angry. You might say to yourself, "This is interesting." By naming the emotion, you begin to separate yourself from it. You are no longer the anger. You are the observer of it. This space allows you to decide what to do next, instead of reacting automatically. Patience also requires us to look at the bigger picture. Often, our anger arises because we focus too much on what's happening right now, in this moment. We become fixated on a small issue, and it feels like the end of the world. But if we take a step back and ask ourselves, will this matter in a week, a month, or a year? We often find that the intensity of our anger is not as justified as it seemed at first. Patience teaches us to keep things in perspective. One powerful tool in developing patience is mindfulness meditation. By sitting quietly and observing our breath, we learn to focus on the present moment. We become aware of how quickly our mind jumps from one thought to the next, often without us even noticing. When we meditate, we practice patience with ourselves, allowing thoughts to come and go without reacting to them. This practice of observing our thoughts without attachment helps us build patience, so that when anger arises, we can observe it without becoming swept away. The Buddha once said, "With our thoughts, we make the world." If we can change the way we think about anger, we can change how it affects us. Patience is the antidote to the impulsive thoughts that fuel anger. When we cultivate patience, we give ourselves the space to think before we act. We choose not to react out of frustration, but to respond from a place of calm understanding. In our daily lives, patience can be practiced in small, seemingly insignificant moments. When you are stuck in traffic, instead of getting upset, try taking a deep breath and noticing the surroundings. When a friend says something that bothers you, instead of responding immediately, pause and ask yourself if your reaction is truly necessary. These little moments of patience add up, gradually changing how we approach life and anger. It's also important to remember that patience is a practice, not a perfect state. There will be times when you feel impatient, when anger flares up despite your best efforts. This is not a failure. It is simply part of the process. Be kind to yourself. In Buddhism, we say, the path is the goal. This means that the journey of practicing patience is just as important as the end result. Each time you catch yourself before reacting in anger, you are making progress. Patience does not mean that we suppress our emotions or ignore our needs. It simply means that we give ourselves the time and space to respond wisely, rather than reacting impulsively. It is not about being passive, it is about being intentional. When we are patient, we are able to respond to life's challenges with clarity, understanding, and compassion. The more we practice patience, the more we begin to see its true power. We realize that we don't need to be at the mercy of our emotions. We don't need to let anger control us. Instead, we can control how we respond to anger. We can choose peace over conflict, understanding over judgment, and love over resentment. Patience is the key to unlocking this freedom. And so, as we continue on our journey to erase anger for good, let patience be our guide. Let it help us build the inner peace that we seek. With patience, we begin to understand that anger is not a permanent state. It is simply a passing storm. And with patience, we find that we can weather any storm, remaining calm, steady, and peaceful. In the end, patience is not just about waiting. It is about how we wait. It is about how we respond to the inevitable challenges of life. When we embrace patience, we step into a life of peace, free from the burden of anger. And that, dear friend, is the true path to freedom. Karma and anger, the consequences of our actions. Anger, like a stone thrown into a calm pond, sends ripples out into the world. These ripples touch everything and everyone around us. They are not small, unnoticed actions. No, they shape the world in ways we might not always see. In Buddhism, we understand this truth as karma. Karma means that every action, every word, and every thought we send into the world has a consequence. It's like planting seeds. The seeds we plant today will bloom in our future. When we act out of anger, we are planting seeds of negativity. We may not see them grow right away, but they will eventually bear fruit. It's easy to think that anger is just a momentary feeling, a reaction to something happening outside of us. But the truth is, anger doesn't live only in the moment. It shapes the future. Imagine a seed of anger planted in the heart. Over time, that seed grows into resentment, bitterness, and suffering. It changes how we interact with others, how we see the world, and how we carry ourselves. We start to expect the worst, to find faults, and to blame others for our pain. We build walls of anger around us, and these walls close us off from peace and happiness. But here's the thing about karma. It's not just about bad actions leading to bad outcomes. The good we do also has its consequences. When we choose kindness over anger, understanding over judgment, love over hate, we are planting seeds of peace and happiness. These seeds may take time to grow, but they always will. And when they do, the results are sweet, like the first fruits of a tree after years of careful tending. Karma is like a mirror. It reflects back to us what we give. If we sow seeds of anger, we will see the consequences of those seeds in the form of more anger, more conflict, and more suffering. But if we sow seeds of understanding, patience, and kindness, the mirror reflects peace, harmony, and joy. We are always shaping the world around us, whether we realize it or not. But the power of karma isn't about fear. It's about understanding that we have the ability to choose our actions and words. In every moment, we are making decisions that will shape our lives and the lives of others. And while we can't control everything that happens to us, we can control how we respond. This is where the wisdom of Buddhism comes in. Buddhism teaches us that we can break free from the cycle of reactive anger and choose to act with awareness and compassion. In the teachings of the Buddha, we learn that the key to breaking the cycle of karma is through awareness and mindfulness. When we are mindful of our actions, when we are fully present in each moment, we begin to see the truth about our emotions. We begin to see that anger is just a temporary feeling, not something that defines us. We start to recognize that we don't have to let it control us. When we experience anger, instead of reacting immediately, we can pause. We can breathe, observe the anger, and ask ourselves, why am I feeling this way? Is this anger based on something real, Or is it a reaction to an old habit, an old story we tell ourselves? When we pause, we give ourselves the space to choose a different path. We don't have to act out of anger. We can act out of understanding, out of patience, and out of compassion. In Buddhism, there is a concept called right action, one of the steps on the Noble Eightfold Path. Right action means choosing actions that are in harmony with our deepest values. Actions that lead to peace and happiness, not suffering. When we are mindful of our actions, we begin to practice right action. We choose to speak and act in ways that bring about positive outcomes, rather than reacting in anger and causing harm. Imagine the difference it could make in your life if, instead of reacting in anger, you paused and chose a peaceful response. Imagine how your relationships would change if you responded with patience, understanding, and compassion. Imagine how much calmer and happier you would feel if you didn't let anger dictate your every action. The beauty of karma is that we are not stuck with the consequences of past actions. Every moment is an opportunity to change, to plant new seeds. If you've acted in anger before, you don't have to continue down that path. You can choose a new way, a better way, starting right now. The power to change is in your hands. Every thought, every word, every action can be a step toward a better future. You don't have to wait for the world to change. You can change, and in doing so, you change the world around you. When we understand karma, we begin to see that our actions, no matter how small, have a profound impact. The words we speak, the way we act toward others, even the thoughts we hold, all create a ripple effect. If we act out of anger, we sow the seeds of more anger. But if we act out of compassion, we sow the seeds of peace. It's not always easy to choose compassion, especially in moments when anger feels justified. But this is where mindfulness and awareness come in. Through mindfulness, we can recognize when we are about to react in anger and choose a different path. We can choose to pause, breathe, and act from a place of calm and understanding. The more we practice this, the easier it becomes to break the cycle of anger and replace it with a cycle of peace. In the end, karma is not something to fear. It's a tool for growth. It's a way for us to understand that our actions matter. Every time we choose kindness over anger, we are creating a better future for ourselves and those around us. Every time we choose patience over frustration, we are planting the seeds of peace. The more we practice this, the more our lives will reflect the beauty of those seeds. As you continue on your journey, remember that every moment is an opportunity to choose. You have the power to change, to act with awareness and compassion. The more you practice mindfulness and right action, the more you will begin to see the world around you transform. And as you plant seeds of peace and understanding, you will see those seeds bloom into a life of joy, harmony, and freedom from anger. The wisdom of forgiveness, freeing yourself and others. Forgiveness, dear friend, is a gentle breeze that clears the dust from our hearts. It is not something that happens overnight, nor is it something that can be forced, but it is the path to freedom. The freedom to live without the chains of anger, hurt, and resentment. You may wonder, why should I forgive? After all, isn't forgiveness just letting the other person off the hook? Isn't it unfair to forgive someone who has wronged you? These are the questions we must ask ourselves when we feel the heavy weight of anger in our hearts. In truth, forgiveness is not about excusing what happened. It is about releasing yourself from the burden of carrying that pain. Imagine holding a stone in your hand. It is sharp, heavy, and uncomfortable. Every time you think about the person who hurt you, you squeeze the stone harder. It causes pain, and yet you hold it, thinking it might somehow protect you. But the truth is, you are the one hurting. You are the one carrying the weight of that stone. The moment you release it, when you let go of the grudge and the resentment, you are no longer burdened by its weight. Forgiveness is the act of letting go of that stone. Buddhism teaches us that the act of forgiveness is a profound act of kindness, not just to others, but to ourselves. When we forgive, we free ourselves from the past. We no longer allow the actions of others to control our thoughts and emotions. Forgiveness is the key that unlocks the door to peace. But it is not always easy. Our minds are often clouded by anger, pride, or fear. We may think that by holding on to our anger, we are protecting ourselves, but in truth, we are only making ourselves prisoners of our own emotions. Let us pause for a moment and consider the nature of forgiveness. To forgive is not to forget. It is not to erase the wrong that has been done. It is simply to accept what has happened and to let go of the hold it has on your heart. When you forgive, you stop carrying the weight of the past with you. You stop allowing past wounds to shape your present life. Instead, you choose to live in the present, free from the shadows of old hurts. Forgiveness is an act of compassion, not for the other person, but for yourself. It is a decision to end the cycle of suffering that you have been caught in. By forgiving, you acknowledge that the person who hurt you may not even be aware of the pain they caused. You may never receive an apology, and that is okay. Forgiveness is not about waiting for someone else to make it right. It is about you making the choice to release the power that the wrongdoer has over your peace. Imagine this. You are sitting by a beautiful stream. The water is calm, clear, and flowing effortlessly. The rocks in the water do not fight the current. They do not resist the flow. Instead, they simply accept the water as it is. When we forgive, we are like those rocks in the stream. We stop resisting the flow of life. We stop fighting the pain. We stop holding on to the past. Instead, we allow the current to carry us forward into peace. The Buddha spoke of forgiveness as a way of healing the heart. He taught that holding on to anger, hatred, and resentment only brings suffering. It is like drinking poison and hoping the other person will die. The only person harmed by anger is the one who holds on to it. When we hold on to resentment, we allow it to take root in our hearts, and over time, it grows into bitterness. But when we forgive, we uproot that bitterness, and in its place, we plant the seeds of peace and compassion. Forgiveness, however, does not mean allowing others to continue to harm us. It does not mean that we should ignore injustice or let people take advantage of us. It simply means that we choose not to let the actions of others control our emotions or our lives. Forgiveness is about setting healthy boundaries and choosing peace over conflict. It is about refusing to let anger and resentment take up space in our hearts. When we forgive, we say, "I will not let this moment, this person, or this event define my peace." There is a story of a monk who was once approached by a man who wanted to harm him. The man was angry and full of hatred, but the monk did not respond with anger. He simply said, "If you throw a stone at me and I do not catch it, who does it belong to?" The man, confused, replied, "It belongs to me, of course." The monk smiled and said, "In the same way, when you throw your anger at me and I do not catch it, who does it belong to?" The man, now understanding, lowered his hands, and his anger dissolved. The monk had not taken the stone of anger into his heart, and because of that, he was free. When you choose forgiveness, you choose to live free. You choose to let go of the burdens that weigh you down. You choose to release the past and embrace the present. Forgiveness is not something that happens all at once. It is a journey, a process. But with each step, you move closer to inner peace. You move closer to a heart that is free from the chains of anger and resentment. In Buddhism, we are taught to see all beings as interconnected. When we forgive others, we are not just freeing ourselves, we are freeing the entire web of life. Every act of forgiveness ripples out and creates waves of peace. By forgiving, we break the cycle of suffering, and in doing so, we create the possibility for healing, both for ourselves and for others. Forgiveness, therefore, is not a weakness. It is a strength. It requires courage to let go of old hurts and to choose peace over conflict. It takes strength to choose compassion over anger and wisdom to understand that forgiveness does not mean weakness, but the ability to rise above the actions of others and remain centered in your own truth. When you forgive, you are saying that you will no longer allow the actions of others to determine your happiness. You will no longer let past events control your present moment. True forgiveness comes from the understanding that we are all imperfect. We all make mistakes, and we all hurt others, sometimes without even realizing it. Just as you would want others to forgive you for your mistakes, it is important to offer that same kindness and understanding to others. Forgiveness is a gift you give not just to others, but to yourself. It is a gift that opens the door to peace, joy, and freedom. When you forgive, you create space in your heart for love, compassion, and understanding. You allow your heart to heal from the wounds of the past, and in that healing, you discover the true power of peace. Peace that is not dependent on external circumstances, but peace that comes from within, from the understanding that all things, both good and bad, are part of the flow of life. When you forgive, you accept life as it is, and in that acceptance, you find your freedom. And so, dear friend, let go of the past. Let go of the anger, the resentment, and the bitterness. Forgive, not because the other person deserves it, but because you deserve peace. You deserve freedom, and in forgiving, you set yourself free. You free yourself from the chains that have bound you for so long, and you walk forward into a life of joy, love, and serenity. Forgiveness is not just an act, it is a way of life.